Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. And I am back racing. I'm so excited over the flu. Finally, this is the Golden State Circuit race. Out here with just one teammate today, so a bit different of a dynamic. And we're up against some big teams with 5, 6, sometimes even 7 riders. Terun Elite, Alto Velo, Ride Bikes Bro, probably a few more I'm not mentioning. So what is our plan on Team Mike's Bikes when it's just 2 sprinters? It's me and Sean. Well, obviously, we want to come down to a field sprint because we're both field sprinters, and that's probably our best chance at winning. But there's a lot of other teams who don't want there to be a field sprint. And for that reason, we have to make sure that we're represented in every threatening breakaway group that's off the front. It's easier said than done because the first problem is like, well, what is a threatening breakaway group? It has all of those aforementioned teams that I brought up. If it has all those teams, if you think about it, everybody else in the field is going to be happy because everyone's going to be like, oh, I have a teammate in the breakaway. It's fine, and the breakaway is going to win. So we can't let that happen. So if there's the right mix of riders from those teams, we have to be represented, even if that means we have to sprint across, close a gap down, chase, anything like that. But that's hard. And Sean and I are just both lazy sprinters who want to sit in. So my instructions for him at the beginning of this race were very clear. It's like, look, there are going to be moments in this race where we have to burn matches and chase stuff back and follow things to make sure that we're represented. Let's make sure that we are sharing that load equally. And by the way, I told Sean, look, if you end up in a breakaway, like, awesome. Like, go. Win the race from the breakaway. That is fantastic. I will be doing the same thing. But in the event it's all together for a field sprint, here's the most important thing. We are together. And unlike most of our pre-race planning, we actually, before the race, we did not designate a field sprinter. Because this race is so dynamic, it's really going to depend on who's done the most work, and then assuming it comes back together with just a couple laps to go, that's when we're going to decide, okay, who is between Sean and I, who's feeling better, who can win this race from a field sprint. But before we even think about a field sprint, we have to make sure we're represented, and you can see teammate Sean up here marking an attack. And this is what it looks like. I mean, this is the type of representation that we need in these little groups that are rolling off the front. And now that Sean's up there, I have full faith that he can seal the deal from that group. So yeah, there goes my power. I'm down under 200 watts because I don't need to follow that wheel anymore. And it might not seem like much, but when you put the pressure on these other riders to fill this gap in, I am saving energy. And you do this, 20, 30 times throughout the race, all of a sudden you have tons of energy left over for the sprint. And then moments later, Sean's brought back. That little move off the front, very unlikely this early in the race it's going to get away. And it's brought back, and I am prepared to slingshot my way into the next move. I'm following this Hot Tubes rider. This is the pattern that you want to see. Sean spent some energy to follow the one before. I spent some energy to follow this one. And, ooh, yeah, it looks like I'm actually out in the wind now. The Hot Tubes rider didn't want to give me a free ride up to this front group. And, yeah, I did a little effort there, but this is what it takes. Nip this in the bud. Because look at the groups, look at the teams that are up here. These are the ones that we mentioned. We can't let this group get away. Have to be represented. And meanwhile, behind me, Sean he's in the draft of the riders who are now looking at the composition, doing the same math that I just did. Like, oh my God, we have to be represented in this group. And sure enough, on the right, look who's following. That's Sean going for the next one. And this is the pattern. Again, this is what you want to see. We did this throughout this race, you guys. I went for one. I followed this attack. And then the next time, Sean takes it up. And then the next time there's a threatening group that has the right composition, I follow it. And then Sean's able to sit in and rest until the next one. And then Sean goes. And on this went until that point that we talked about in this race where it looked very likely that it was going to stay together for a field sprint. And it was at that moment when finally Sean and I had that discussion. Who is going to be the lead-out guy and who is going to be the final sprinter for today's race? Yeah, so hopefully the GoPro captures the conversation, but Sean was basically like, hey, Jeff, what's the plan? We're 2.5 laps to go. And I said, point blank, hey, can you win? And Sean's like, yes. Sean is a very powerful sprinter. So I told him, hey, just make sure you follow my wheel. I'm going to go early. And it's important that if you lose my wheel for whatever reason, you have to let me know. Otherwise, for obvious reasons, I'm going to lead out the wrong guy. So let's fast forward a little bit here. Now we're closing into the final lap. Let's just talk through this final lap because it was so interesting and so dynamic. And the first thing you'll notice is in the rear camera. And that is my boy Sean, glued. He's basically my shadow this race. Like, he was just glued to my wheel in the final couple of laps. And you're going to see how good of a job he does. I think we're going to bounce back between perspectives here just to show kind of what I was going through. Because every once in a while I was periodically looking back to make sure he was still on. Again, that is so important, you guys. If I just assume he's there and he's not, I'm going to go early like we talked about, and I'm going to lead out the wrong rider, and that could be a disaster. So it's always important when you're leading out a teammate, whether it's just one teammate or a whole team of 6 riders, there has to be a clear line of communication. So you're not making any wrong assumptions and not leading out the wrong guy. The other thing you'll notice is I'm not panicking. Like, yeah, it's the last lap. We have 2.5 kilometers to go, and oh my God, EJ almost wipes out there. By the way, shout out EJ in the P1-2 race. Second race of the day. We're going to have his experience from the Cat 3 race on this channel, so stay tuned for that. He saved a pretty gnarly one right there. I get by him, and again, I'm checking back to make sure Sean is still on. Not panicking, like I said. Heart rate's in check, even though we just did an effort. I'm slowly creeping my way up the field. Sure, I could get out into the wind, smash all the way to the front, and have Sean in my draft the whole time, but then I'm not going to be any value for him in the final few hundred meters when it matters the most. So that's not the plan. I'm just going to slowly creep up, find little areas here and there on this course. That outside line on that corner back there was so great. It's even sheltered on that side. I absolutely love taking that line the whole race. I even gave my teammate Sean a little bit of space on the outside to make sure he's protected from the wind also. We're not panicking. We're moving up still. We're looking for areas to move up as efficiently as possible, staying in the draft for absolutely as long as possible, only getting out in the draft either to avoid like some gnarly, dangerous riding, or if we're like really up against it, only a few hundred meters left and panicking. And now look, we can see the front, right? We're like 5th wheel, 6th wheel. In fact, this might even be a little bit too close to the front. But without big team control, this is still pretty good position. If you saw all of Tehran on the front, for example, right now, it would be much more important to be like right behind their sprinter, but there's really no control on the front. I think Tehran spent a lot of energy and a lot of their guys being involved in each one of those breakaways. They were represented in like every single breakaway of the day, so they're down to just a couple of riders left in this race. And what does that mean for how the finish is going to play out? That means it's kind of inconsistent speed. There's going to be some late race attacks. When there's a lead out with a big team, things are just full gas from like the whole last lap if you have a few riders. But this is the most critical part of the course, I think, for a lead out, because we are going straight into a headwind at this moment. And I'm totally boxed in, by the way. And I'm getting passed on the right by a million riders, checking back some more to make sure Sean is still there, because I'm taking some pretty high-risk lines. And he is doing such a good job to stay on my wheel. But this is like a risk-reward thing. Yeah, we just lost a lot of positions, but we're getting such a good draft as we're going 31 miles an hour straight into a headwind. This is a really good moment to be in the draft, as long as we're not losing too many positions. And I think we're still good, because we're still over 700 meters to go. Now, we're going to make this final left-hander. I'm going to get rid of the rear camera. Don't worry, I'll bring it back eventually, but I just want you to experience this like I experienced it, because that was the last time I looked back. It was just too dangerous to look back. I just had to absolutely focus on what was going on in front of me and take the best possible line. So from this moment on, I didn't hear a peep. I assume he's still on there. And like, I want to go early, guys, because in a tailwind sprint like this, I mean, we're going over 30 miles an hour already, and we haven't even really launched the sprint yet. So once I see some daylight, I just launch it. This is almost a 400-meter sprint. And why is this a good idea? This is a good idea for a couple of reasons. One, Sean is in my draft. I am leading out Sean, so I don't even need to go all the way to the finish line. Second reason is we're going over 40 miles an hour now, and there's a feature. There is this chicane that I'm entering right now, which means there's a moment you can rest. This is still a very long sprint, but I look back right here, and I see somebody's wheel, and I'm like, oh, please be Sean. And yes, it is my boy Sean coming through with the W. 1-2. Let's watch that again with the rear camera turned on. Okay, so this time we get to see what's going on, even though I was not privy to this information when I was actually racing in this moment. And you can see it gets a little bit dicey here with no control on the front like I was talking about. It is just about position. There's no really crazy fast lead out. So I'm about to shoot this gap, and actually it is from a lead out rider. This Ride Bikes bro. I go to the right, which is a pretty tight squeeze. Sean decides to go to the left. He gets a little bit boxed in. Now, if we look at the rear camera, I launch. I just assume he's in my draft. I'm going for a really long sprint because I know he's going to come around me. Turns out I just got a gap because nobody was really prepared to launch that early. I caught him by surprise. The good news is, check out Sean. Sean also kind of did the same thing, just from the other side of the road. So look, guys, I'm not going to sit here and say we won this race because of our brilliant two-man lead out in the final couple hundred meters. In fact, we kind of screwed that up. If this were like a national level crit, we totally would have lost this race. But despite our mistake there at the very end, we did a really good job 99% of this race, which allowed us to go super early, super strong, and hold off our competition through the chicane. And what do I always say about entering the last corner first in a crit, guys? You'll be standing on that box. We came in first and second through the final chicane, and guess what? We finished first and second. So huge shout out to Sean for taking down the W. And as always, catch you guys in the next one.
Oh, that's so sick. Like, right there, I looked over at Jeff. I was like, let's fucking go.